From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
Good morning. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. This week, an in-depth look at Rhode Island's housing crunch. If you or anyone you know is struggling to find a home, you're not alone. Data shows the number of homes on the market in Rhode Island has fallen by half in the past decade, and that's especially hard for local families trying to find their first home. Our own Ted Nesi explains why inventory is down and prices are up.
I've quickly realized that it's a lot harder than I initially thought.
Timothy Owens lives in Wakefield. He and his wife started looking for a house after getting married last October.
There's just not a lot out there right now, so it's been pretty frustrating.
The Owenses are far from alone. According to the Rhode Island Association of Realtors, 3 years ago, the average single-family home was on the market for 110 days. This February, they were selling in just 65 days. And that's leading to some sticker shock. The median price of a home in Rhode Island peaked at $283,000 in 2005, then dropped as low as $190,000 during the Great Recession. Now it's back up to $255,000.
Oh, there's a huge demand to live in Rhode Island. Contrary to what folks think, right? There's not a desire to leave the state so much as a lot of folks feel like they have to financially.
John Marcantonio heads the Rhode Island Builders Association. He notes communities are issuing far fewer permits for new homes today than they were in the 1980s and 90s.
The way I summarize this is our cities tend to act like towns, and our towns tend to act like gated communities. Cities don't like density, towns hate density.
Why? One major reason, the cost to educate children.
That's the fundamental problem when it comes to residential housing. We're afraid to have families live in our state, to stay in our state.
It's definitely part of the conversation.
Ashley Sweet represents Rhode Island's municipal planners at the State House. She says new housing means new families, and that means cities and towns have to pay to educate more students. In other parts of the country, the state bears more of the cost of education.
Using simple numbers, if a house contributes $5,000 per year for taxes to the municipality, we're looking at somewhere around $15,000 to educate that child.
That's a big gap.
We're already at a net loss.
Also a challenge, rules that require building houses on large, multi-acre lots.
The land cost drives up the price of housing, which causes the need to build bigger housing to get more of a profit out of it.
Despite the tight market, Timothy Owens says he and his wife don't want to leave Rhode Island.
I mean, we've talked about it, but with work and most of our families around here, so this is the area we want to stay in.
Here to talk in depth about the state's housing crunch. To my right, we have Dave Caldwell. He's the president of the Rhode Island Builders Association. Joe Luca, president of the Rhode Island Association of Realtors. Brenda Clement, director of Housing Works RI, and of course Ted Nesi from WPRI.com. I want to go around the table to kick off this topic, and Dave, we'll start with you. Sort of fill in the blank here. When it comes to low housing inventory in Rhode Island, the number one barrier is what?
Local and municipal regulations.
All right, Joe?
The same, absolutely.
And Brenda?
It's definitely part of the problem.
So, Ted, you know, one of the things that was really hurt my ego this week was I posted your story on my Facebook page for WPRI, and it turns out, according to the data, your story was the number one story on my own page.
Thanks for your help.
Yeah, absolutely, anytime. You got a lot of reaction to this one.
Yeah, I was, our producer Nick and I, you know, we worked, obviously we do the story because we think it's a story, so we thought there'd be some interest, but we were surprised by how much feedback we got once we put this out there. And I think we did an okay job with the story. I think that's more because we were touching on something a lot of people are already thinking and talking about. We know that in news, that usually it's when you hit on something that's already being discussed that you get a lot of reaction on social media, people commenting on our Facebook, tagging, wives tagging their husbands to say, oh, look, it's not just us. That they're searching out there. We can commiserate. Yeah, and then a lot of talk among elected leaders, policy folks, people like that about, yes, this is really something Rhode Island should probably be discussing more because it has a lot of effects.
Before we get into zoning and all the challenges that we face in Rhode Island, Joe, give us a snapshot of what it's like right now. What is the state of Rhode Island's real estate market?
The market is very strong. It's solid. Prices are solid. But the problem is there aren't enough houses for sale for the demand. There are more buyers than there are sellers. So we need more product. And unfortunately, the people that are finding it hardest to find a home are the ones who can't afford a lot of home to begin with. They're getting outbid for houses.
So
let me follow up on that, Joe. Well, so I read every month you guys put out your latest stats from the realtors, and you always have a quote in there kind of about what you're all seeing.
Right.
And it was pretty striking to me. You expect the realtors to always want the hottest market they can have. And you said a couple months ago in your monthly report, you said you actually hoped it would be a little more moderate in 2018 and 2017 because you said we don't want to get to a point where affordability issues are creating havoc again. Explain a little more why even the president of the realtors is like, we don't want it too hot.
Yeah, well, ideally, you want to have almost like controlled growth and expansion, because if it ramps up, if things go up too quickly, we don't want to have a bubble. Okay, we just want to have healthy, sustained growth and increases in equity.
Dave, one of the things that stood out to me in Ted's report was the way this state funds its public education system is applying downward pressure on housing construction. Talk about that a little bit.
In essence, everyone agrees we need growth. Rhode Island needs more people, more larger workforces, families. But at the municipal level, the perception is any growth is in liability. So the cost is borne by the municipality, mostly in the school systems, which is the largest single item in any budget in Rhode Island at the municipal level. But the gains of growth in housing accrue to the state. So the state, everyone at the State House would desperately like to see more growth, more housing. That's because they see the gain, jobs, income, the economic activity. But the municipality perceives that as a liability, as a cost for the school. Therein lies the rub that needs to be essentially fixed.
And it's not just schools, right? We should point out it's other services. It's sewer, it's police and fire, whatever. It puts strain on the municipalities.
Agreed.
All right. So Brenda, what is the argument that it's better for cities and towns to have more housing?
Well, housing advocates like me say that the path to economic opportunity begins at your front door. I mean, nothing works right in your life if you don't have that safe and decent place to get up from every day. Everybody needs a place to go to for jobs, for school. So growth and development and rehabbing existing buildings and repurposing existing buildings puts properties back on tax rolls to help local communities. So it makes sense to invest in housing in our local communities, to provide housing but for workers, but also to provide a tax base for communities.
And Brenda, actually, I see in front of you a chart I actually recognize. It's too small to throw up on screen.
You are a sucker for charts.
Yeah, exactly. But you folks at Housing put out this fact book every year, and you kind of break down where people could afford a home right now. What do those stats show right now across the state about where it's affordable?
So right now, if you earn less than $30,000 a year, you cannot afford to reasonably rent or buy anywhere in the state. If you're under $50,000, you have a few more options, but even under $50,000, you can only affordably buy in both Providence, excluding the East Side, and Central Falls. Even at $70,000 in income level, only about 12 communities are considered affordable.
What's the median income level in Rhode Island right now?
The median income level is about $54,000.
So that's
a
lot
of people.
So it's a lot of people who are priced out of the market, and a lot of people who are priced out of the opportunity for equity and the security that home ownership gives.
So we're going into we're in a new legislative session. Again, this is for all of you, but I guess we'll start with you, Joe. Are there any legislative fixes that can happen to make things a little bit more manageable?
Certainly, there are some things that we can do to reduce regulations, and one of the things that we're doing is it's an electronic filing of real estate documents. What that does is it allows things to happen much more quickly when there is a real estate transaction, to have things filed electronically. There's uniform codes that we have to comply with. New Hampshire has done this. Rhode Island, we have legislation that the Rhode Island Association of Realtors, is supporting, and we want that to go forward because that's one thing that'll make it easier for things to happen. For whatever type of documents need to be filed, they can be filed electronically. There are some other ones that we're tracking too, as far as right of way. Fannie Mae has changed. They will no longer guarantee mortgages for homes that have a right of way or a private driveway. So unless there are covenants recorded with the city or town hall, basically establishing who's responsible to maintain that right of way, or if the state has a statute to do the same. And we're supporting legislation which will establish state statute regarding rights of way.
Dave, what about through the prism of the builders?
Well, a bill just passed yesterday in the Senate that we call the Municipal Infrastructure Grant Program. It passed 31-2. And what that would do, it's modeled after a very successful program in Massachusetts called MassWorks, which grants small dollars to municipalities for what I call infill infrastructure, water, sewer, stormwater. That has been so successful, Governor Baker just asked for north of $300 million more for that program. And even over the border, where you see in our legacy communities in New England, where sometimes the building got out ahead of any planning, to connect areas on existing roads in existing utilized, high density areas. There's no water, sewer, and gas, sometimes stormwater. The municipality would say, okay, you can build all this high density right here, but you, developer, have to put in the water infrastructure, and then it's prohibitive. Then you can't. Then you can put in some. The state can put in some. The town can put in some. That program's been so successful in Massachusetts, our leadership here is looking at that and saying, yeah, that does work, and that would work for targeted areas in the urban service corridors of Rhode Island. That's huge. That eliminates a barrier at the local level. So who's going to put the infrastructure in to support the density we need to get the prices we have to have in the market?
People hear that word density, Dave, and they get nervous. I can imagine some people home saying, well, Dave and his buddies want to come into my neighborhood and, knock down everything, build, sky-high towers or whatever they want to do. What do you say to people who say, it's not wrong to feel like I bought a certain neighborhood and I don't want it to change too much? What do you say to that? It's a real concern people have.
Sure. And in the developed neighborhoods that are mature, that stays the same. But if you look at the history of Rhode Island and look what we used to build 100 years ago or 200 years ago, and say North Kingstown and Wickford Village, I'm from North Kingstown, our most celebrated area of town is very high dense. It's very dense. It's beautiful. And that's the way people used to build. And as long as we plan for that, and there's plenty of pockets in Rhode Island where you can say a 5,000 square foot lot is perfectly fine. That gets a house on it. That's what's elsewhere in the country. Planning for it properly in the right areas where there's already higher density and leaving the open spaces open, everybody wants that. Everybody, environmentalists, the builders, everyone, okay? The people who are demanding us to go out into the woods where we don't want to be and have these 2-acre zoning sites are the municipal local codes for the reason to protect those neighborhoods already there. So there are ways to make this work. Just has to be thoughtful.
Do you, Brenda, see when you folks look across the state, is there like low-hanging fruit, do you think, that would maybe A, have less of a backlash, and B, you could get a lot of housing?
So yes, Dave's right that it makes sense to build where we're connected to jobs and to a transit system. So connecting around train stations, connecting around RIPTA bus hubs, other places where people can get access to jobs, transportation to go to jobs or be close to jobs makes total sense for affordable housing development. So doing it smartly, rebuilding in our village centers all makes sense.
Brenda, we have to go to a break pretty soon. But I got to tell you, if we were doing this show when we probably did this show in 2009, it would have had a very different tone. In the wake of the Great Recession, there were homes that were just stagnating on the market. Inventory wasn't a problem, and we got there because people rushed to buy a home in, say, 04 and 05 when the market was really hot, and then they were underwater. We all remember people mailing their keys to the banks. Are you worried that we might be there again? I'm always worried when bubbles are starting to form, and certainly as prices go up dramatically, the danger is always there. I say all the time that when the foreclosure bubble burst, it wasn't a pretty little soap bubble that just went into the sky. It was a big sticky wad of gum, and it stuck, and we've been scraping up the mess for many, many years, particularly in neighborhoods and communities that were hard hit by foreclosures. Foreclosure numbers are way down in Rhode Island, but there's still a persistent problem in a number of neighborhoods and communities. So trying to retrofit and get those properties back online is something that is where it makes sense to grow and develop. In Providence and other core communities have been trying for a long time to get those properties back online. Joe, real quick.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, the percentage of distressed sales right now is in the single digits. We were well into double digits when we were there before. And what's very different today compared to back then is that the lending criteria, you need to demonstrate that you can pay the loan back now, whereas back then you didn't need to demonstrate that you could pay the loan back. So
that's also how they appraise homes now is very different than they did then, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So there was a rubber stamp appraisal back.
What do you need to appraise at?
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. You can't have that at all anymore. But the lenders there's a lot of criteria that they need to adhere to. So.
Our conversation on the Rhode Island housing market is going to continue when we come back, including the impact from Washington, D.C. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Newsmakers, I'm Tim White. To my left, WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi. This week we are talking about Rhode Island's housing crunch, and we welcome Brenda Clement. She's Director of Housing Works RI. Dave Caldwell, he's the President of the Rhode Island Builders Association, and Joe Luca, President of the Rhode Island Association of Realtors. Sometimes for this show, the best conversation actually happens during the commercial break. And Brenda, you brought up a good point that Rhode Island's lacking something to address this problem.
So we're lacking a number of things, but particularly kind of a master plan and vision about where housing goes and where we should encourage growth and development in our communities. We know from some reports that we've issued that the growth in population is going to be in millennials and people who are aging and seniors, and yet we don't have an action plan in place to address those changing demographics and changing needs. So leadership at the top and at the planning level at the state is critical for moving forward.
Joe, do other states have plans in place?
Yeah, there are other states, and the thing is, too, we are so small, and we have 39 municipalities with their own sets of...
We could manage it.
We could do it at the state level. Look at this, you know, LA County, much bigger, a lot more houses, a lot more people, and they manage it like that. So we certainly should be able to manage it at the state level.
But in the end, you know, one question I got this week, I'll put this first to you, Dave. And people were saying it to me on Twitter, people writing back to my story and saying to me, well, if the houses are so hot and people are trying to buy them and there's so much demand, isn't this how capitalism is supposed to work? People should be rushing in because they're going to get a profit and build the houses that people want to buy, build the housing. What is stopping, kind of the basic laws of supply and demand from working here?
Well, in business school, I had a professor that told me, our class, if you could teach a monkey supply and demand curves, you made yourself an economist. So what we have here, if the demand is going up, prices are going up briskly. I would agree with Joe, they're going up too fast. That's not healthy. Eventually you'll hit a bubble. So we know we're producing about 1,000 units a year in production. We need about 3,000 in demand. So we're not producing that. Why? Well, there's a distortion in the market that's preventing that. And that is exactly these local municipal regulations that we're talking about. The market should be rushing in, like they do elsewhere, to provide housing that my market, my people in buildings should be producing a product, and they can, that Joe's clients want to buy. They do that elsewhere. Why is that not happening?
The 2 to 3 bedroom, not these massive houses that we see everywhere here right now.
There's nothing in the middle right now. That what production we need can be produced. Why is it not happening? Okay, that's the distortion.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I was just going to say, just to put a number on it, Rhode Island was ranked 51st, when we include the District of Columbia in residential building permits for the last 5 years.
So no place was doing less than Rhode Island?
Nope.
And it's not even close between 50 and 51. We have the data on here.
It's a big gap.
Yeah.
It's a big gap.
Joe, go ahead.
I was going to say, the average price of a home is about $250,000 in Rhode Island. And if you look at new construction, you're not going to find anything below the mid threes.
Right.
It's high threes, 400 plus, and again, they're all those big lots, because they have to have setbacks, and those are expensive to build.
Is there any? We're talking a lot about the challenges, and they're clearly very real. But are there any communities that are taking a more positive approach to building or new housing? Maybe Brenda, do you see anywhere that's got a more welcoming approach to additional homes?
I think certainly our urban core communities are trying to look at reinvestment and again putting any vacant and abandoned buildings back onto their stock. We have a state law called the Low Mod Housing Act that sets a goal for every community to get to 10% of their affordable housing, their housing stock as affordable, and that's affordable for people 80% of median income. And there are a number of communities who are realizing that they need this to develop their workforce and are looking actively at plans. But it's still not enough, and only 5 of 39 cities and towns currently meet those goals.
Dave, same question to you. Do you guys? There's a place, the Mecca, where all the builders are trying to rush into because they like the housing building there?
No, I would say Central Falls and Pawtucket are really forward-thinking. They've got some real visionary people up there and some really strong leadership, and the future looks quite good at the train station. But because they kind of have to, they were put in kind of dire circumstances, so they got ahead of this. But by and large, most of the state would just prefer not to build anything.
Yeah. Dave, I had 2 people come out to my house to give me an estimate on a fence. A wooden fence, and I had done the same estimate 5 years ago. And the price difference between 5 years ago, I should have done it then, I didn't, and now was stunning. And it wasn't really the labor cost that went up.
Sure.
It was the wood.
Listen, between July 1 and December 31st of last year, softwood lumber went up 18% because we're playing with tariffs with Canada. 2 weeks ago, the price of cedar went up 21% overnight, another tariff. So these aren't getting a lot of publicity like, down in Washington, but you're 8 to 10%.
But is Washington playing a role? Because tariffs is, people are talking a lot about tariffs right now because of the steel and aluminum tariffs that went out.
Correct. These are some of the lesser known ones that have been floating through the
that's interesting because we're hearing about soybeans in Illinois a lot, but you're seeing an impact in Rhode Island from the tariffs.
Correct. So you would see, and we can show you the data on that the price of lumber went way up, the price of cedar, the price of building products. We've been put on notice for roof shingles and vinyl and gypsum. That's all moving up. That's there's demand for it. You're seeing some playing with the tariffs with Canada, specifically with lumber. So yeah, your products are moving up. Labor is moving up a little, and you're starting to see some inflation in labor, but it hasn't really hit yet. That's a whole other discussion about the lack of the workforce development of bringing people in the trades. But yeah, it's all moving. The price of housing is not coming down to produce it.
Joe, the other item out of Washington, D.C. is the Fed is inching up interest rates, meaning mortgage rates are starting to tick up as well. It's a seller's market right now. I think it's safe to say. Could that change the balance?
Well, the increase that the Fed had a couple of weeks ago, that was really already baked into the mortgage interest rates.
But they're talking about raising it more.
Right. And the historic average for 30-year fixed-rate mortgage is 8%. So even if they raise it 2 more times this year, we are still going to be well below the historic average.
But that has a dramatic impact on a monthly payment on your mortgage.
Yep, a quarter of a point increase on $250,000 mortgage is probably about a $50 increase in your monthly payment.
Something real for people.
Right.
I think of my dad telling me I think he bought our first house 19%.
Oh my goodness.
Beginning of the Reagan era. Yeah. Before I was born, he's like, you weren't.
You have it easy.
Yeah, exactly.
He was lucky to get it.
Now, it's going to be offset because incomes are starting to rise. We really didn't have real incomes haven't risen in Rhode Island and even nationwide since 2007, if I'm correct. And we're starting to see increases in that. More people are working. We're at more than full employment, depending on where you look at the numbers. So.
Also, Joe, something else I know your folks tracked very closely was the big tax law that passed at the end of the year. A lot of different moving parts there were in that about the mortgage deduction and the tax deductions and around and stuff. In the final estimate, now that you guys have had a little time to look through it, what are the biggest impacts for people, for sort of average folks trying to buy a house that you think that'll have?
It actually is going to be net zero for average folks in Rhode Island, because the average price of a home is $250,000. Roughly taxes, property taxes of $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, maybe $6,000. The limit is $10,000, so you can have income tax and property tax still deducted on your federal tax return. However, my colleagues in New York and New Jersey, where they were paying $30,000, $40,000 a year in property taxes, it's hurting them. But the average person in Rhode Island is not going to be impacted. The National Association of Realtors also lobbied hard so that we could retain the mortgage interest deduction and the property tax deduction, because when the tax reform bill was first proposed, neither of those were included. So we had to work really hard to keep that.
And how about, I don't know if this would be a Dave question or a Joe question, but the home equity lines of credit, there's been a lot of, some people think that's disappeared. It sounds like it hasn't totally disappeared. You read in on that?
As far as I know, that hasn't disappeared. That is still there.
As far as I know, that has not disappeared.
Yeah, I think you should Google that, because I've heard a lot of people saying it's gone, and I don't think it's quite gone the way people think. Yeah,
and people are still improving their homes using a home equity line credit. The House Speaker successfully got his car tax phase-out plan up and running, and it means in 4 to 5 years or so the car tax will be eliminated unless the legislature changes its mind.
That never happens.
No. Is there any concern that could impact real estate taxes and have an effect on the housing market at all? Have you thought about that?
We haven't really done too specific thinking about the impact of that, but I don't think it will have an immediate effect. But I will point out that in Rhode Island, unlike our other states, we don't have any kind of dedicated stream towards the housing and housing production as well too. And so looking at ways that if we have tax savings and that we can redirect savings from the state budget into further investments, that would be certainly something that I would love to encourage a debate and discussion of at the State House.
Dave, a minute left. Do you have a thought on that?
I agree with Brenda. Statewide leadership, our federal government has housing and urban development. Our sister states have cabinet-level secretaries of housing. That's what I'd like to see.
And Joe, with less than a minute left, if we do the show again 1 year from now, what's your prediction? What is the market going to be like 1 year from now?
I think the market is still going to be strong. I think values are going to remain the same, and we will still have strong demand. The millennials are continuing. The age range where people buy houses is 30 to 34. The number of people entering that age bracket right there is going to continue to increase for the next couple of years. So I see strong demand continuing for another couple of years.
In 30 seconds, Brenda, if you could ask the House Speaker for one thing out of this session, what would it be?
I think we have to address millennials, but also address folks who want to age in place. And so looking at investing back into our housing stock to help our seniors stay in their communities and with their support systems.
It's a fascinating conversation. And if you missed Ted Nesi's report, which we played at the top of the program, he has a full article on that with it's chock full of information. Make sure you check it out at WPRI.com. Dave Caldwell from the Builders Association, Joe Luca from Realtors, and Brenda Clement, Director of Housing Works Rhode Island. Thank you to all of you for coming on the program. Really appreciate it. And for Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers. It was a good show.